Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good to be here with you, with us as a group. Um, and been thinking a lot recently about discernment and sort of my place in in the world and in our practice. And you know, we're living in some times in our country of great discord. Asian American hate has entered our consciousness and mainstream media as a long unspoken but deeply ingrained American reality. We spent the last 18 months or so really paying attention to the Black Lives Matter movement, which has called us all to think about microaggressions and implicit bias and race-based hate, um, and uh, and the disproportionate impact of COVID on Latinx communities and the disproportionate response from the healthcare and medical communities. Um, really give us some things to think about, it seems to me, and to wonder. And then the treatment of the elderly during the first part of the pandemic and the treatment of children at our southern borders really has had me in a funk recently. And just kind of thinking about how did we become these people that live in a world with all that going on? And how do we respond? You know, what do we do? And I've discovered, you know, that I came to Buddhism, you know, 29 years ago now, partially because I wanted to have a response to the chaos in life. At that time in my life, it was mostly chaos generated by me and shared gleefully with all those around me. But I knew it was time for a change, and I was thinking that in Buddhism, I might find what Sharon Salzberg, as you know, I love to quote, described as the possibility of a life lived with peace and ease and equanimity. But what I've discovered over the years is that there's no one-size-fits-all Buddhist practice that I can impose on any situation that comes up. Over and over again, I think I'm called just to return to my authentic life, to my authentic self, and to get in touch with compassion and kindness for myself and for those around me, and then to move into the world with some respect and some kindness. For me, my life's journey has always said that I must be concerned and that we must be engaged and active, that we can't sit silently by. And yet I find myself 28 years later as a Buddhist in a practice that we do a lot of sitting by. And so I wonder some days as I'm reading those headlines or thinking about what's going on in the world, I wonder if we really are having an impact on the world. And on my good days, I realize that we are at the very simple level that if I'm sitting in practice, that it impacts me and that hopefully I add less chaos to the world and add more peace. And that through that, not exhibiting bitterness or failure, a sense of defeat about the condition of the world today or our country, and not sharing that with others. I, in fact, have the capacity to bring some more compassionate joy to the world. And so that practice alone would be enough. But, you know, even in our Buddhist temples and our sanghas and our lineages, we have the opportunity to see up where instead of being good examples of how to be unified and how to be one with each other and so forth, that we see arguments and interpersonal squabbles and discussions of which way is the right way. And you know, I'm reminded, and I think somebody mentioned it here last week or the week before, that the Chinese teacher Yun Man was asked, what is the highest, most profound teaching of all the Buddhas and patriarchs? And he replied, an appropriate response or an appropriate statement. So I was thinking about that, and it's like, appropriate. Well, that would be one that adds to the peace and adds to the safety and kindness to others. And so what is the appropriate response? And I was listening to a talk by Stephen Batchelor at Upaya, and he uses the example of a toolbox. And he says that, you know, when we were kids, maybe we were given our first tool by our dads or by a good family friend, and say that tool was a hammer. And we were told that this was the best tool ever. This was the most important tool. And so we believed, you know, that person that gave us that gift, and we began to use that hammer to bring things together and tear some other things apart. There's, yes, a personal story in there. But we believed it. And then one day, as we were doing some little project, we had to cut a piece of wood, and we discovered, nope, the hammer is not the proper job for this. There must be, even though I was told this was my first tool and therefore the best tool, that there are other tools that I can use for, depending on the situation. So for us as Soto Zen practitioners and Buddhists, we're told that Zazen is the most important practice. Zazen is that first tool. To just sit, shikantaza, nothing but sitting, silent illumination. And that allows us to be fully present in the moment. And that is indeed an important tool. It seems to me, sustaining tool that has allowed me to practice to the degree that I have for these last couple decades. But in time, we realized that it's not just Zazen, that all of our lives are practice, moment to moment, every task, every person we encounter, every object that we come in contact with. So there's no question that for me, the time spent in Zazen is important. And to achieve that pose, that posture of calmness every day for some period of time is really important. And it's important for me, and as I said before, important for everyone with whom I come in contact during that day. But it feels to me as an activist, longtime activist and an engaged Buddhist, that sometimes I think that I'm required to respond to a person in this moment. Someone calls for help or asks for something, and I feel like I have to respond in the moment. Or when I read a headline or experience, I've been to a lot of workshops and rallies and support things in the last few weeks. And I really believe that I have to do something and do it right now. And those are thoughts that sort of fly in the face of the idea for me of Zazen. And it's not one or the other, but I think the balance is really important. You know, if people are suffering and having a hard time, you know, there's a couple of elderly people in my building, more elderly than me, if you can believe it. And I was talking to one, and she was very isolated and feeling very lonely, and just was as sad as I've ever known her to be. And, you know, in my mind, I was on the way to sit Zazen, and I thought, well, let me go sit Zazen for an hour, and then I'll come back and go for a walk with this person. Or when I heard about the violence against folks in the Asian communities here in San Francisco and across the country, you know, would I think, let me go to a compassion retreat and see what arises for me as a response by the end of the retreat on Sunday evening? Or would I get engaged right now? And as I mentioned, I'm be turning 70 at the beginning of May, the first week in May. And some things have become kind of clear to me. One is that there's not an either or in terms of, do I sit Zazen or respond to the neighbor lady immediately? It's both. It's both. I can do both things in my life, and everything doesn't have to happen right this minute. But I can lead to action by my Zazen. I can live my practice by responding first to somebody who's in danger, and then living that practice on the cushion or on the chair when I get done. And I've really learned, as I said, that I've been thinking a lot about discernment, the need for wisdom. In that Dharma talk that I mentioned before, Stephen Batchelor says that wisdom is an appropriate translation of the word prajna, the Sanskrit word, but it lacks, he thinks, what the early Buddhist teachers had intended, which is in the Pali, the word pana can be translated as the process of intelligent discernment. And our good friends in France use the word précis, like our word precise, but précis, to describe a process of describing what's the appropriate response to any given task or question. And what all of those definitions and expressions have in common is that in the ideal world and with experience, we do those things as more and more a part of our intuitive life. So rather than just jump into something, we take the moment or the time it takes to discern what it is that we should be doing, or that I should be doing, or we should be doing. There's a great value in Zen in the ability to respond to things in a non-conceptual and non-hesitant way. But that's what I'm saying, is that that doesn't happen just because we want it to, or because someone said it should. It's the results, in my case, of years and years of practice, of staring at a blank wall and cultivating my ability to say, what is the next right thing to do? This quality of discernment is, it seems to me, what Yun Men was talking about when he said the appropriate response. So one of the things I've learned, and I've been reading a wonderful book lately that is called Buddhism, One Teacher, Many Traditions, and written by the Dalai Lama and Tubten Chondro. And what it's a really a call by these writers and the folks that helped them put this together, a call for Buddhist unity. And so, you know, as I think about discernment and think about how we as Buddhists and engaged Buddhists particularly can be involved in making the world a better place, it is helpful, I think, to look within our own traditions and lineages to see how it is that we can create discernment and create unity and so forth. So in this book, they acknowledge that there are many lineages and traditions, and in those lineages and traditions, there are specific cultural, country, regional, community, and sangha practices and forms. And then in the Dalai Lama's wonderful way of sharing, he says that, you know, many times recently in the last decade, we've all, including many of us in this morning's practice, have gone to conferences or meetings where we talked about unity, and we talked about you know, lineages coming together, and we've talked about shared practice opportunities. And in the book, the Dalai Lama reminds us that the conference happens and we have wonderful ideas, and then, as he says, all too often we go our separate ways and nothing happens until the next conference. And I think that's you know, sort of a truism in life, that, you know, oftentimes we do a lot of studying and a lot of participating, and we can use discernment even there to see how much of that is just talk. Some of you have heard me say before that one of my least favorite expressions in the world of social justice is when somebody says, we need to begin a conversation about racial equality or ending discrimination against the elderly or taking better care of our children. And it's just a phrase that gets used a lot. We need to begin a conversation. And I always worry, it's like, what, you know, where have you been? We've had conversations and we should still have them, but we need action. And we've actually had some. While you were waiting to get to this page, there's been a lot of stuff going on. And I worry about, and I'm sure I've said it myself from time to time, but we should begin a conversation in 2021. Seems a little odd. But what the authors in this book, Buddhism, One Teacher, Many Traditions, share with us is that we are, at the end of the day, a huge and diverse Buddhist family, but we all follow the same wise and compassionate teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. And that our diversity has allowed Buddhism, rather than get in its way, is allowed Buddhism to be all across the globe, literally experienced by billions of people, often with respect for their culture and for their traditional family ways of being and community ways of being, and that's a beautiful thing. And that the result of a conference or a coming together wouldn't be to have one Buddhism with one set of rules and one set of forms and practices, but that in fact that diversity is good for us and gives us opportunities. Now, all that individual interpretation of forms and practices and ancient teachings can sometimes land in unskillful and harmful actions and practices. And a quick look at the news from Myanmar will give us an example of that. But I think for the most part, the opportunity to live lives filled with peace and ease and compassion are given to us because we have our practices and we're committed to them. And we have the capacity and willingness to be open, completely open to the practices and the ways of practice of others. Certainly there are forms and rituals and traditions and teachings for a reason, and they're very helpful to us. But we shouldn't be rigidly adhering to them. And we should create, as I think we do at Hartford Street, a lot of space for people to practice the way that they can and the way that speaks to them. And that they should make decisions based on their work with their teacher and their understanding, all of our understandings of what can possibly work in our lives. And that if I think about that, what can possibly work in my life becomes the teaching, and my life is my message. So that becomes really important, that I respect that for me, and then I respect it for everyone else without even, in a good day, not every day, but on a good day, without even wondering why somebody does it that way, or why somebody, did a particular ritual in a certain way that maybe it wasn't the way I saw it the last time, or even the way I remember them doing it the last time, just to be open to whatever's going on. So that practice, as I say, begins with me, or begins with each of us individually. Are we tolerant of the practices, rituals, and interpretations that are not mine, that I didn't create? Do I cling to Soto Zen practices as the correct practices when I'm talking with others from other lineages, or reading texts and sutras and koans from other lineages? Or do I wish that I had found Tibetan practice first because of the creativity and colorfulness of their icons and fashions? Or do I occasionally go to a meeting at Spirit Rock or a workshop at Spirit Rock and think, wow, there is a really casual, laid back je ne sais quoi here. Folks rolling around on the floor and drinking tea during meditation and that sort of thing. And maybe that would have been kind of cool if I'd found that first. But those thoughts actually reflect a very shallow interpretation of what's going on in either of those two traditions, and some thinking on my part that's maybe somewhat humorous, but probably pretty lazy, and doesn't encourage me to go deeper and to really understand those two traditions in a way that this book that I've been reading really helps me to do, and takes me on a journey to understand how we all came through the various lineages from the days of the Buddha and before to 2021. So the book reminds me that whatever the lineage or the source, whether the language was Sanskrit or Pali, all teachers emphasize emptiness. And all practices encourage us to have empty mind, to be open to all possibilities. Our own teacher says, in beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, in the expert mind's ones. And so in our practice, we remember and we are taught that the path is easy for those with no preferences. And I love, and we've read it here before, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but if you have not read the Zen Zen Ming in a while, I really encourage you to take it out with you when you go to the beach or for your walk along the park, and just give it a read. And it's sometimes translated as faith in mind, or a verse on the perfect mind, if there is such a thing. I'm not going to read it all, but I do want to, in terms of this discernment, share a couple of the verses because I think they're important. The great way is not difficult for those who have no preference. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. Make the smallest distinction, however, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. If you wish to see the truth, then hold no opinions for or against anything. To set up what you like against and what you dislike is a disease of the mind. When the deep meaning of things is not understood, the mind's essential peace is disturbed to no avail. And then further down, those who do not live in a single way fail in both activity and passivity, assertion and denial. To deny the reality of things is to miss their reality. To assert the emptiness of things is to miss that reality. The more you talk and think about it, the further astray you wander from the truth. Stop talking, stop thinking, and there is nothing you will not be able to know. And then towards the end of the poem, of the verse, it says, in this world of suchness, there is neither self nor other than self. To come directly into harmony with this reality, just say when doubt arises, not two. In this not two, nothing is separate and nothing is excluded. One thing, all things, move among and intermingle without distinction. To live in this realization is to live without anxiety about non-perfection. To live in this faith is the road to non-duality, because the non-dual is one with a trusting mind. To live in the great way is neither easy nor difficult, but those with limited views are fearful and irresolute. The faster they hurry, the slower they go. So as I say, that's just a piece of it. And I really encourage you to download it and read it. And maybe you have recently, and maybe you've got it memorized way better than I do, but it's just such a beautiful teaching, and really offers, in my interpretation of it, so much hope that there is the possibility that, you know, not ignoring the realities of life, but not getting all caught up in trying to be the smartest kid on the block, or have the most immediate answer, or, you know, get my merit badge filled with little stickers because I've done service here or done something there. I will say, in the beginning of my Buddhist practice, and probably for the first more than half of it, this was a tough teaching for me. You know, my birth sign is Taurus, and some of the things they say about Taurus folks are that they are stable, and that they are intelligent, and then they say things like that they can be stubborn, they can be dedicated, but they can also be consistently ambitious and have mental tenacity. And basically what that means is, you know, for me growing up, I was never the most handsome gay boy in the crowd, or the, you know, the most athletic kid in school when I was there. So I always thought my thing was to be the smartest one, or to be the court jester, to be the most humorous one. And one of the ways I did that was by accumulating what I thought at the time was knowledge. So you could ask me about public health, or you could ask me about, you know, whatever the great political debates of the world were, and I would share with you knowledge and facts. Well, the good news about reading that verse and studying as I have for the last couple of decades is that I now know that those were opinions, and that those opinions often did more to separate me from others than to actually bring me in contact with others. And so what has helped me the most in coming to, one of the things that's helped me the most in coming to my current practice of calm abiding is the teachings of Dogen, and specifically the fascicle on instructions to the Tenzo. And that is a wonderful teaching, and you can find it in the book Moon and the Dewdrop, among other places. And there's a lot of important stuff in there. But what resonates for me most is a couple of specific things. One is how important it was, the work of the Tenzo is. The Tenzo is the person that does the cooking at a monastery, or the person that leads the kitchen at a sesshin, or a practice period, or a retreat that we might go on. And Dogen, who was by that point that he's writing this, an esteemed teacher and an elder and so forth, and he goes from Tenzo to Tenzo in this teaching, and sort of asks them, well, why are you walking so long a distance to pick up some mushrooms? Why shouldn't you be in the Zendo sitting? Or why are you chopping carrots so precisely? You've been practicing as a monk for many decades, and shouldn't you be doing something much more important? And the wonderful news is that each Tenzo continues what they were doing in terms of that specific practice, and says, person from a strange land, you don't really understand practice. Everything we do is practice. Everything that every act is to be undertaken wholeheartedly and importantly. And every act is interconnected. So what we know nowadays, those who have been to monastery, or who have been to sesshins, or in work periods at the Zen centers at Hartford Street or other place, is that if the food is not ready, if the food is not carefully prepared, then everyone else, the monks and the abbot, don't have the energy to sit their practice and to do their work practices. And so it's all interconnected. So peeling a carrot is a practice that's very important, no less or more so than the folks meditating at this particular moment. And Dogen offers 3 guidelines in this fascicle. And he says, 1, when you think about what you're doing, number 1, is it a benefit to others? Because if it is, it simultaneously benefits you. Number 2, does it contribute to the growth of the monastery or the sangha? And number 3, are you emulating the masters of old? Are you paying attention to our traditions? Are you paying attention to your teachers? Are you paying attention to those who have been in the practice, so that you can learn from what they have learned, to do what they did or not do what didn't work? He offers the verse that says 2/3 of your life has passed, not polishing even a spot of your source of sacredness. You devour your life. Your days are busy with this and with that. If you do not turn around and shout, what can I do? And so that for me is the practice. That for me is the practice. Every task is important. Vacuuming, tending the garden at Hartford Street, teaching, chopping the carrots, managing the zendo, answering the door. For me, that becomes really important because as we sit, we ask for and discern what the needs are of others. And what we learn to do, hopefully, is to ask, to not come in with my ideas, which I have done over and over throughout my life, as has most of us, with what should be done, but to actually sit and ask what it is that the community or what it is that the individual needs. I can remember in the example that I used earlier, at one point asking the nice lady in the apartment below me if she would like me to take her for a walk. Hopefully I didn't word it quite that way, but that clearly was the idea. And she demurred and said, no, thank you. And then later I found out that she had just had hip surgery and that it was all she could do to walk to the door when I kept ringing her doorbell to ask her how she was doing, much less have me dragging her around the neighborhood to appease my sense that she needed to be connected. So it's a very humble initiative, that stopping and using our meditation practice to say, everything is important. In one translation that I read of the word Ino, which is the manager of the meditation hall, in the ancient Sanskrit, it was called Karmadana, the bringer of joy to the assembly. And I thought about that a lot. Like I've never been the Ino, but when I really respect the folks that do that work. And it's so important because having things in place, having things organized and ready for our services and practices, we may not think about mopping the floor or putting the chairs out as being as important. But in fact, each of those is a sacred activity related to our practice. And each of those deserves the same respect as the work done by an abbot or a teacher in giving a teisho or a talk. Different things, certainly, but each sacred and each deserving of respect. So each is a gift to the assembly, and each starts, I think, with the opportunity to say, what can I do? Can I give a talk? Yes or no? Can I be the cantor? Yes or no? Can I help in the garden? Yes or no? And does somebody want me to do that? Yes or no? At a recent meeting we were all having, I tend to rush to a fix, which is an old habit that I'm really working on. But someone suggested that help in the garden would be lovely. And so I took out a calendar and tried to pick a day. Completely wrong response. The response was, on the right day, see if somebody needs help in the garden that day when the sun is out and there's work to be done. So I think this is the true meaning of bodhicitta, that truly open heart, that open mind that we have that says, I want to be of help to others. I want to be of service. And if we can get rid of our habit behaviors and really rest in calmness, we have a chance to do that. In a beautiful talk I heard last week by a guy named Mui Lewis, he calls this emotionally inclusive Zen. And I don't know if he made that up or some of you may know that it comes from somewhere else, but I thought, what a beautiful expression, emotionally inclusive Zen. And he talks about that we accumulate karma. It's the residual of our past actions and behaviors. And so in dealing with karma, we have a chance to clear it through our practice. That's the whole point, or one of the whole points. We can offer forgiveness and amends, first to ourselves, and then to others. And amends is different than forgiveness or apology. Amends means living amends, to change the way we work, the way we interact, etc. So if I'm bored or angry or frustrated, I can understand that that's residual karma left over from past experiences of mine or those who came before me. And each clearing that I have, each time I practice forgiveness, each time I practice sacred stillness, I have an opportunity to clear some room in my head and my heart for some fresh ideas and some new opportunities to interact and connect with people. There's a beautiful word in Japanese called Minmitsu, and the word is often translated as mindfulness. But in the context of Buddhism, it actually can be a little deeper than that. And it really talks about paying scrupulous attention, being careful, and being considerate, intimate, and warm-hearted, and paying continuous attention to details, like the details of the garden, the details of getting a Saturday morning program set up. Somebody got up very early and put the electrical equipment together, and somebody wrote a talk, and other people showed up, and these are all characteristics of Zen practice. And this attention to detail is described as a continuous intimacy with Buddhist practice. Our own Suzuki Roshi says that Minmitsu is to be very considerate, very careful in doing things. And he describes it as the defining characteristic of the Soto sect and a teaching of our lineage. So one of the things that he said in one of his talks was that mindfulness, as it's usually taught, is inward, coming inside, seeing who I am, seeing what's going on, seeing from where I operate. And Minmitsu points outwards to relationships with people, and relationships with everything that we come in contact with. It's really important that we, as we practice, that we pay attention to the altar, to the flowers, to the cushions. There's a lot in Zen practice, and Mio has been a good teacher about those zafus belong in a certain way. The arrangements on the altar belong in a certain way, and there's a reason for that. And if we all do the same thing, that is not exclusive, that becomes more inclusive. We all have a chance to practice the same way. So, I think that in recovery, we have a concept called a geographic, and that's where somebody takes off and moves somewhere else or goes somewhere else when things get tough. And the hope is that we'll leave the problem behind when we go. And as some of you know, I moved back and forth from Boston to California 6 times in my early recovery. So I think I was a good practitioner of the geographic. But John Kabat-Zinn has taught us that wherever you go, there you are. And in my in a Dokusan with Mel Weitzman on 2 occasions, he told me, just do this, Stephen. And I said, what? He said, stop moving, stand still and go deep. And so I remember the story that a young man, after a month-long retreat, asked Suzuki Roshi how he could retain his peaceful state of mind once he left. Suzuki Roshi said, don't worry, it'll go away. And so I think the point of that is that we really learn through this practice to sit with what we have and who we are. And sitting with what we have and who we are gives us this opportunity to give careful respect to every aspect of our lives and every aspect of our practice. Everything is ultimately important, and everything is Buddha nature, right? So the little things that we do to prepare the Zendo or to strengthen our sanghas, the ways in which we come from the sangha out into the world, we are told to be very careful with details. And why are we careful with details in Soto Zen practice? Because there is nothing else but the details. We have the opportunity to take this present moment very, very seriously. And in Soto Zen, we have that opportunity then to open up our minds and our hearts. And so I think there's an old adage that says, you get the love you think you deserve. So today, I'm on a journey, and I invite you to come on a journey of your own, not a geographic to outrun the present challenges that we face in the globe and in our country, but rather a journey inside to bring loving attention to my own life, for you to bring loving attention to your life, and to remember the capacity that in this sacred stillness, we have the strength to breathe, we have the strength to ask the question, what can I do? And then we actually have the strength to just do that this is not a race. We don't need to hurry and rush. And the words of the Buddha said, a wise person cares for themselves, a wiser person cares for others, but the wisest person of all cares for self and others together, always. And in the Bendawa, Dogen says to us that Buddhist ancestors, out of their kindness, have opened up a wide gate of compassion in order for all sentient beings to enter realization. And so I think that for me, when I get in a funk and wonder what's going on in the world and how do we become these people, and I think, in Buddhism, we should have something to offer the rest of the world in terms of our compassion and care for each other. And then sometimes you think, maybe not so much, between lineages, between traditions, between competing retreat centers or Zen centers struggling to keep membership up. Sometimes even within our own sanghas and Zen centers, the reality that we're human beings and that sometimes there'll be communication issues and sometimes unity and sometimes bumping, and that all of that is human. And so we get this opportunity because the ancestors have made for us a way to embrace the importance of the small things and the details, and that everything we do is important in bringing our lives to full practice and to full practice realization, that everything we do is practice, and our practice will set us free and will enable us in that freedom to be interconnected with all suffering sentient beings. And so for me, I think it's really a beautiful time to be alive. There's lots to do and lots of people to do it. And so it's important for me to, take that deep breath and be willing to completely ask the question, what can I do? And to share the answer to that question with all of you so that all of you have an opportunity to be equally engaged in actions that are important to your life and that you are have the capacity and energy and wisdom and love to do. So I invite us all to not be daunted by the challenges in the world right now, but to be strengthened by the practice and to know that each one of us creates that practice every single time we show up on Saturday morning and every single day in every single thing we do. So thank you. And take a question or two before tea and cookie time. Mio.
Stephen, just a note about the Zen Zen Ming, the poem on believing in mind. It's I think people often get into a kind of a misinterpretation where they start to think that they are working towards some sort of life where the human experience of liking this and not liking that vanishes. And I don't think that's realistic. And I wondered if you could talk about that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I don't. I think it says the path is easier for those with no preferences. And so I think if we could manage to have no preferences, wouldn't life be just delightful and wonderful? But I think it's a guidance. And I think the fact of the matter is we do have preferences. That's how we stop from walking in front of traffic. That's how we stop from burning our hands on the stove. And importantly, that's how we stop from hurting someone's feelings by things we say, because we think about and we have discernment about our next word or our next action or our next thought. And so we don't want to be completely, it's not possible for human beings living in crowded urban environments or any other probably to be without some preferences. But I think that the way I work with that poem is that I'm not without preferences, but my preferences aren't so important as I thought they once were. And if I ask instead, what else is possible, then it's a much easier path for me. So that, do I need to be rigidly attached to my preference for vanilla versus chocolate ice cream if someone has just served chocolate ice cream? No, because that might hurt somebody's feelings who went to some trouble to buy that ice cream. And so I think it's that piece for me that I certainly, as a human being with a prefrontal cortex, I certainly have preferences or discernments, but it's not to be rigidly attached to them. And for me, it's always to take a look at them, hopefully before speaking or acting, but if not, shortly thereafter to evaluate what was my intention and what was the impact.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Cheryl.
As you were talking and sort of talking about how, we can sort of let go of the forms, I was thinking, say a Picasso or Dali, who are very avant-garde artists, you look at their early work and it's rigorous academy training, just like we have rigorous training in the Zendo. And it's often said, and I'm not sure which artist said it, but that you have to learn the rules before you can break them. Or a John Cage, or a Merce Cunningham, like all of these people with rigorous training. And only from the rigorous training do they kind of let go of the form, so to speak. And what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think there's a ballet called the Trocadero Monte Carlo, something or other, and it's all men that do classical ballet, and they make fun of it. But before you can get in the troupe that travels around the country performing, they study classical ballet for years so that they know exactly how to do all the movements. But when you see them, it looks like almost slapstick. It's beautiful, but it looks like slapstick. And I don't know if you or others here had the opportunity to go see the Picasso and Calder exhibit at the museum here in San Francisco. But as you look at those, I just blanked on the word, those Calder hangings, those things that hang, and yes, thank you. And you look at them and think, wow, that's just, that little piece of this and this shape and that shape and this shape. And then you realize it's all hanging in a particular way. And so that involved, while it looks like complete expression, complete freedom and expression, that, there's art involved in that, and there's some physics involved in that, and there's some engineering involved in that, and there's some construction involved in that. And then the result, the impact on us is, wow, what a burst of creativity and energy. And so I think you're exactly right, Cheryl, that, as we learn this practice, it's very important for us to have good teachers and to be in touch with, the traditions, and to honor those who come before us by knowing what they did and why they did it. And then to hold that, I would say, lightly, if it gets in the way of your practice of Soto Zen or Buddhism. And so to do that in communication with teacher, or with good Buddhist friends, Kalyanamita. But that as we learn, I think for me, one of the great learnings has been how much there is that we can do in practice to make the practice available for self and others, that doesn't require years in a graduate school or years in the library, or translating ancient text from Sanskrit or Pali, or all those important things. And we're glad the scholars, including any who happen to be here, have done that and are doing it. But in the meantime, chopping the carrots and turning on and off the lights is equally a way to practice everyday practice. And so to find the balance between honoring the tradition and knowing the forms and rituals, and then making them alive for people in communities of color, and for the elderly, for children, for people in different regions and countries, requires and offers us so many opportunities to do things differently, and to feel really good about our part of that sacred practice, valuing the teachings and living the practice both. Thanks. Does that help?
Thank you.
Yeah.
You reminded me, Stephen, I went to a performance of the Ballet Trocadero years ago with a friend who was a ballet dancer. And he said, after the performance, he said, if they didn't know exactly what they were doing, they would totally wreck themselves.
Right. Yeah. Well, you think about it, and I occasionally will hear people at our meditation and recovery meetings talk about that they've developed a meditation practice, often fresh out of a rehab center of some kind, and that they're now sitting for 60 to 90 minutes a day, every single day. And, I often have deep concern and compassion for them that is a lot of time to be sitting still if you don't have some support and instruction and good posture, and the necessity for stretching before and after that, and especially if your body is coming off years of abuse by addiction, it's like you really need to be taking care of your body. And meditation certainly is a gift for folks in that early stage of recovery. But to jump right in and to sit for 90 minutes a day without somebody helping you with posture and form and so forth could in fact be dangerous physically. So I think that's the same thing with folks in that particular ballet. You need to learn how to take care of your body, otherwise you'll end up falling off the edge of the stage or, you know, leaping into the arms of one of the other guys. And as they actually show in one of their filmed experiences, somebody leaping into the arms of someone and going right straight over the person's head because they hadn't practiced it enough. So to make it look like a burst of creativity, like Calder or the ballet, that ballet requires, as Cheryl said, you know, just very, very, very careful preparation and skill development. Any other thoughts? Okay. Well, the sun is shining outdoors and there's an ocean to walk next to and a garden to be in and probably for some of you jobs to go to or something, but whatever it is, have a beautiful day. Thank you, everyone.